Have you ever looked at your life and thought, why does this keep happening to me? Different people, different years, different circumstances, but somehow the same story plays out again and again. The same heartbreak, the same financial struggle, the same feeling of being stuck right at the edge of something better, but never quite crossing over. If that sounds familiar, I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now. Because what Carl Jung discovered over 100 years ago explains exactly why your life keeps repeating, and more importantly, how to finally break the cycle. Jung called it the unconscious, not the vague, mystical idea you might be thinking of. He meant a very real, very powerful part of your mind that runs beneath everything you think, say, and do. And here's the thing most people never realize: your unconscious mind does not care about your goals. It does not care about your vision board or your 5-year plan. What it cares about is completing what was left unfinished. And until you face what's buried down there, it will keep recreating the same experiences in your outer world until you finally get the message. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 specific things your unconscious mind forces you to repeat, and what Jung believed you have to do to raise yourself out of that loop. This is not toxic positivity. This is not just think positive. This is deep, uncomfortable, life-changing psychology. So let's get into it. The first thing your unconscious forces you to repeat is your earliest wound. Jung believed that every single person carries what he called a wound from early life. Not necessarily a dramatic trauma, sometimes it's subtle. Maybe you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe you were told you were too much or not enough. Maybe love in your household came with conditions attached to performance. Your child mind didn't have the tools to process that wound, so it did the only thing it could: it buried it. It pushed it down into the unconscious and built a personality on top of it. But here's where it gets fascinating. That wound doesn't disappear just because you buried it. Instead, it becomes what Jung called a complex, a charged emotional knot that sits in the dark and quietly pulls the strings of your adult life. And because the unconscious always seeks resolution, it will keep placing you in situations that echo that original wound. Not to punish you, not because the universe hates you, but because some deep part of you is still trying to heal what happened to that child. So, if you keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners, ask yourself, is this familiar? If you keep self-sabotaging right before success, ask yourself, was success ever safe in your family? The situations may look different on the surface, but the emotional signature is identical, and that signature is coming from the wound you haven't looked at yet. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that for a second. What you've been calling bad luck, or bad timing, or just the way things go, Jung would say, that is your unconscious running the show from the basement. And the only way to take back the wheel is to turn the lights on downstairs. Now here's the second thing your unconscious mind forces you to repeat, and this one surprises a lot of people. It forces you to repeat the very things you judge most harshly in others. Jung had a concept he called the shadow. And the shadow is the collection of all the parts of yourself that you were told were unacceptable: your anger, your neediness, your ambition, your sexuality, your grief, your jealousy. As a child, you learned very quickly which emotions were okay to express, and which ones earned you rejection or punishment. So you did what any smart kid would do. You hid those parts. You shoved them into the shadow. But those parts don't vanish. They just go underground. And here's what the shadow does when it goes underground. It starts projecting. Whatever you've rejected in yourself, you will see it everywhere in other people. The person who constantly complains about arrogance is usually sitting on buried pride they were never allowed to express. The person who can't stand victims often has a deep inner wound of helplessness they've never acknowledged. The qualities that trigger you the most intensely in others? Jung said those are mirrors. They are showing you exactly what you haven't integrated in yourself. And why does this create repetition? Because when you're unconsciously running from your shadow, you keep attracting its energy. You attract the controlling person because you've never owned your own power. You attract the chaotic relationship because you've buried your own wild nature. The universe isn't sending you these experiences randomly. Your own unintegrated energy is magnetizing them. This is what Jung meant by vibrating higher, not some vague spiritual frequency, but the literal energetic shift that happens when you stop suppressing parts of yourself and start integrating them. You cannot rise above what you refuse to look at. Here's the third repetition pattern, and this one hits hardest for high achievers. Your unconscious forces you to repeat the roles you were assigned before you were old enough to choose them. In every family system, children are unconsciously handed roles: the responsible one, the peacemaker, the scapegoat, the invisible child, the golden child. You didn't audition for this role. You were cast in it based on the needs of your family system. And because this role was how you learned to survive, how you got love, safety, and belonging, it became the blueprint your unconscious defaults to under pressure. So now you're 35 or 45, and you're still the one who fixes everything for everyone. Still the one who makes yourself small so others feel comfortable. Still the one who burns out trying to earn love instead of just receiving it. Not because you chose this, but because the unconscious is playing the script from chapter 1. Jungian therapists call this the persona, the mask you wear in the world. And there's nothing wrong with a persona. You need one to function in society. The problem comes when you fuse with it, when you forget that the mask is not your face. Real growth, Jung said, requires what he called individuation. That's the process of peeling away the roles, the masks, the scripts you inherited, and discovering who you actually are underneath all of it. And that process is not comfortable, because the people around you are used to the old role. When you start changing, there will be resistance. Some people will feel threatened by your growth, and your unconscious will keep pulling you back to the familiar role because that's what feels safe. But safety and growth are not always the same destination. We're halfway through, and I want you to sit with something before we continue. Everything we've talked about, the wound, the shadow, the roles, none of it means you are broken. Jung believed deeply that the psyche is always moving toward wholeness. These repetition patterns are not evidence of damage. They are evidence of intelligence. Your unconscious mind is relentlessly, desperately trying to bring you into integration. The question is whether you're going to meet it consciously or keep fighting the same battles in the dark. The fourth thing your unconscious forces you to repeat is the story you tell about what you deserve. Beneath your conscious desires, the career, the relationship, the life you say you want there, is a deeper narrative. a story about what someone like you actually gets. And this story was written long before you had the language to question it. It was written in the look your father gave you when you failed. It was written in the silence that followed your excitement. It was written in every moment your needs were treated as inconvenient. Jung understood that the psyche organizes itself around these core narratives the way a city organizes itself around a river. Everything flows according to the story, and if the story says you are not worthy of sustained happiness, if it says good things don't last for people like you, then your unconscious will very efficiently dismantle anything that contradicts that belief. Not out of self-destruction, out of self-consistency. The mind will always choose consistency over happiness when the two are in conflict. This is why people sabotage good relationships, why they unconsciously overspend the moment financial stability appears, why they get sick right before a breakthrough. The unconscious is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to protect the story, because the story, no matter how painful, is what feels like home. And to leave home to actually allow yourself to have what you say you want requires you to rewrite the narrative at the root. Not just affirm new things out loud, not just tell yourself you're worthy while the old story still runs underneath, but actually go into the unconscious through therapy, through journaling, through dream work, through whatever process resonates with you, and do the deeper rewrite. Jung spent decades studying how the unconscious communicates through dreams and symbols precisely because he knew that logic alone cannot touch the stories buried that deep. You have to go into the language the unconscious actually speaks. And that brings us to the fifth and final thing your unconscious forces you to repeat, and this is the deepest one. It forces you to repeat the relationship you have with your own inner life. Jung's entire framework rested on one central idea, that the relationship between the conscious self and the unconscious is the most important relationship of your life, more foundational than your marriage, your career, your friendships. Because all of those outer relationships are reflections of this one inner relationship. If you are at war with your inner world, if you suppress your emotions, deny your intuitions, bulldoze your own needs, and shame yourself for your darkness, then that war will show up in every external relationship. The contempt you have for your own weakness will become the contempt you project onto others. The fear of your own depth will create a life lived entirely on the surface. But when you turn toward your inner life, when you start getting curious about your dreams, your moods, your irrational reactions, your unexpected grief, something shifts. The unconscious stops having to scream through external crises. It can start whispering through insight, through creativity, through the kind of quiet knowing that actually guides you toward the life that was always meant for you. This is what vibrating higher actually means in Jungian terms. Not bypassing the darkness, not pretending the wound doesn't exist, but integrating it, bringing it into consciousness so that your whole self, light and shadow together, is finally moving in the same direction. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been waiting patiently, relentlessly, sometimes painfully, for you to come home to yourself. So here is the question I want to leave you with today. Not as a rhetorical flourish, as an actual invitation. What is the pattern in your life that you're most tired of repeating? And if that pattern is a message from your unconscious, if it's showing you exactly what still needs to be seen, what would it be trying to say? You don't have to figure it all out today. Jung didn't believe in quick fixes, and neither should we. But awareness is where every transformation begins. The moment you see the pattern clearly, really see it, without blame, without shame, the loop starts to loosen. If this video made you think about your own patterns in a new way, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below, tell me which of these 5 repetitions hit closest to home for you. Was it the wound, the shadow, the roles you were handed, the story about what you deserve, or the relationship with your own inner life? Your answer might not just help you, it might be exactly what someone else scrolling through these comments needs to read today.